Hello guys and welcome to part 1 of a 3-part series on my channel where I'm going to just go through and demonstrate some of my favorite personal tips for using Ynab. These are things that I use, if not every day, then at least every week when I'm going through my budget and using the budgeting software system. Ynab or you need a budget. So a quick note, this is not a how-to setup Ynab video. So if you're just getting started with Ynab and you haven't even set up your budget, this might not be the most helpful, but this will be helpful once you've set your budget up and you're beginning to intermediate user of Ynab. So like I said, this video is going to be this is a 3-part video, so this is the first part. And in this section, we're going to go over the budgeting and category screen, which is what I'm on currently right now. Second video is going to be on the accounts and transaction side of things. And then the third video is going to be about general Ynab for Toolkit settings that you can use. I am going to talk about a couple of Ynab for Toolkit settings that you can use that I use. But the vast majority of that is going to be covered in the third video. And I'll go in and explain what the toolkit for Ynab is later on in this video if you've never heard of it. So with that being said, I guess my only other disclaimer is this is not a you must use Ynab this way, and I'm not even going to be talking about a fraction of the things that you can use Ynab to do, a fraction of the features that Ynab has. I'm just going to talk about a couple of things that I really want to highlight, and who knows, later on I might come back and do a part 4 or 5 of other things that I think are really great about the program, but for now we're just going to do this, and I hopefully it's helpful, and if my exact policies and procedures to how I handle Ynab don't work for you, maybe it gives you ideas for other things that you could do. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is notes. So off the top of my head, there are 4 places where you can leave notes for yourself in Ynab, 2 on the account side and 2 on the budgeting side. So obviously with this video, we're only going to talk about the 2 on the budgeting side. So the first place that you can leave notes is actually right up top, right underneath the month, in this monthly notes section. So this is just notes for that month. When you move forward, they will disappear and you'll have this little enter a note. And if you move backwards, you're going to get the previous month's notes or whatever month you're on notes. I really like to use these notes for marking achievements or things of note that occurred that month that might have impacted my budget. For instance, in April, I said I got the last paycheck from my previous full-time job, the first paycheck from my new full-time job. I opened an HSA and I started contributing 15% to my 401k, and then I also got the COVID stimulus check. This is really, really helpful when you do kind of a year-end review of your budget, and maybe something looks off in your budgeting reports and you don't maybe remember what that was. You can always go back to that month. For instance, November of 2019, it was my school's alumni weekend. It was a 3-paycheck month, and I officially got 1 month ahead in Ynab. And I think that's really great that I can look back on my budget and see those notes. The second place that you can leave notes for yourself inside of Ynab is actually in the categories themselves, and these are category specific notes. So when you click on a category and you come over to the right in this little inspector, scroll all the way down and you'll have this little notes category that you can leave notes for yourself. I don't know if I can spell maintenance correctly. Ownership, I think, is the name of my category actually, but I like to use these category notes for a lot of rules. So for instance, with Ynab, at the end of every month, you can either roll money over to the next month or move any extra available money to another category or back to be budgeted. And you don't have to have the same policy for each category. Some categories I like to roll over to the next month, other categories I like to move excess to other to another goal of mine. And so I like to use these notes as one way to mark that and remember that. So for instance, for gas, I put $80 a month, and then I have this note that no more than $120 should ever be available. I would move any extra of that to my car ownership category as a way to build up a sinking fund for any smaller car expenses like oil changes or car washes or something like that. I find it really helpful also for things like the gift category, as it allows me to break down a base kind of rough budget of what this gift category is actually going to be used for. If you didn't want to have, you could create your own whole big category group called gifts, and then under that category you could have each person that you're going to buy for. To me, that's just too many categories for me personally, so I like to use the notes section to kind of keep track of that for me. You can see I even wrote down some Christmas gifts for 2019 for what I wanted to get each person in my family, so that's a great place to put that. The third thing I'm going to talk about is the category names themselves. So you can completely customize these category names to include the precise information that you need them to be. My basic structure is first the name of the category. So what is this thing that I'm actually paying money for? In this case, it's car insurance. Then the monthly cost, and then the day it's due. So for car insurance, it's car insurance $150 and it's due on the 1st, right? So I just kind of follow that basic structure down through my monthly bills and then my subscriptions. Ignore this, I just added this line today as a kind of reminder that I want to buy HBO Max, and I'm going to have to figure out where that money is coming from. But ignoring that, you can see that with my subscriptions where I have the subscription name, how much it's for, and then the day of the month it will come out. And then once you get to more yearly or quarterly expenses, you can still do that. In this case, I have April 2021 for Amazon Prime, so that's how I know it's a yearly expense. Some people can get really specific, and you might want to have your monthly subscriptions have an M at the beginning for monthly, and your yearly subscriptions have a Y at the beginning for yearly. I obviously use the vertical line to break up my information, but you can also use parentheses or dashes, and you can make it really aesthetically pleasing to your exact tastes, which I think is really fun, and you could honestly spend hours doing this, going through each line. Something that people like to do is input emojis into their category names, and this is actually something that I'm thinking of doing. I kind of have a couple of emojis down here. I have these lock emojis that lets me know no matter what, I'm not allowed to wham from this category. So if I have overspending in giving, for instance, that money can't come out of my gifts category. It would need to come out of another category that doesn't have that lock on it. So that's one way that people use emojis to kind of clue them in on what the importance of that category is. And so like I said, I've actually thought about applying and using emojis for all of my categories myself, and I think I'm actually gonna post a video later on where I go through each of my categories and add some emojis to them, so be on the lookout for that. My next tip is kind of connected to the previous one. It's just to have fun with your category names. Obviously, we already talked about you can put a lot of information in each category name, but I like to have fun with my category group names as much as I can. So if you'll notice here, I have this category called Winter is Coming, and then down here I have this category called A Lannister Always Pays, and these are references to Game of Thrones. So Winter is Coming is for my sinking funds because it might be summer right now, but eventually winter always comes and you need to be prepared. And then A Lannister Always Pays includes all of my student loan categories and debt payments because A Lannister always pays their debts. It's not the, it might not be the best house to look up to, but in that regard, I want to be like them. And pay off all my debt. So having fun little names like this makes me want to look at my budget more. It brings me a little smile. It brings a little smile to my face every time I open up my budget. It's just fun. So I encourage you to at least find one category that you name something fun. Maybe it's a song lyric or a movie. If you're getting engaged or saving up for a wedding, maybe it's the one ring to rule them all, whatever. Bring your little nerdy, geeky self, whatever makes you happy, and find a way to bring that into your budget, because I promise you it will make budgeting so much funner. And then the next thing I'm going to talk about is having a category. It's having categories separate from the category that you actually spend the money out of, which might sound confusing. So I'm going to actually enter a transaction to show this. But down here in my savings and holding category, I have this 2020 medical deductible fund. So what this is I want to save money to have my entire medical deductible and eventually my entire out-of-pocket max for my medical insurance saved up throughout the year. But I don't want my spending in my reports to reflect this 2020 medical deductible category, because at the end of the year, I'm going to change this to 2021 so that any money that's left over in here is rolled over to 2021 and I don't have to start from scratch saving up for the medical deductible. And I actually want all my spending to be reflected in this medical category. So how would I do that? I'd come to my checking account or whatever account this money's being spent. I'm going to say the payee is medical. The category is going to be medical, and the memo will be hospital bill. The outflow will be $800. So when I do that and I come to my budget, you'll see I'm overspent in my medical category, but I have that money in my medical deductible category. So what I'm going to do is cover this overspending with medical deductible. So now I have in my reports, this medical spending is correctly reflected in the right category. And then I can come down to my medical deductible and see that I still have $1,130 before my medical deductible is fully met, or I still have all of this money set aside for my medical deductible. I like to separate these two categories. For me, it makes sense. For you, it might not, but I just wanted to show you that option if you've never thought about it. Another area where I do this is with this category. This is my wedding fund category for my sister's wedding. She's getting married in March of 2021, and so I'm saving up $1,000 for that. But when the time comes to actually purchase anything for this event, whether that's a dress or, something for the bachelorette party, I'm going to actually reflect that spending in this events and holidays category, because I don't want to have one category in my reports for my sister's wedding, which is a one-time event, hopefully, knock on wood. I'm not going to have to go back to her wedding, I'm not going to need this category again. But if I spend money out of this category, it's always going to be reflected in my reports, and I'm going to have to either keep it open or hide it after I'm done with it. Versus if I do all of my spending out of this events and holidays category, and once I no longer have any money left, I can just delete it completely, because all of the budgeting and spending was actually done in this category. So it's not something you have to do. For some people, I can totally understand how it might be double work, or they just don't like that, but I thought I would point it out, and it is something that I like to do to separate all of my goals. And then I'm just gonna undo a couple of things. Okay, that should have brought my budget back to normal. Yep, okay. And then my last two tips are actually in regards to the toolkit for Ynab. And the first one you actually briefly saw. I guess I shouldn't have done that, but let me do that again and say medical, $80. I am budgeted in the future. So if you see, I have money budgeted in June and July. So when you're budgeted in the future and you do any overspending of like your checking account or any non-credit overspending in the current month, Ynab will actually take that money from the furthest budgeted out month that you have, which in my case is July, and so it won't. Your to be budgeted in May won't show as red, but it will in future months. But it's really hard to be aware of that because in the current month everything looks fine. So Toolkit for Ynab has this option, and it's this under the budget screen. It's the stealing from the future alert, and it will highlight budgeted next month red when you've gone negative at some point in the future because of overspending in the current month. So I find this really helpful for people who like to budget in the future like I do, because this is what normally that overspending would be reflected here as red if you were only had money in your current month. But if you're budgeting in the future, obviously that money, they're taking that money from future months. It makes sense. The way Ynab does it actually does make sense, but it can sometimes frustrate people because they don't have any way to know that that's going on if they don't have this feature. And Toolkit for Ynab is a Chrome extension, so you have to use, I think you have to use Google Chrome to have this. I personally use Safari for pretty much all of my internet goings-ons, except when I use Ynab, I always use Chrome because of the Toolkit for Ynab, and it just allows you a lot of features. I'll be talking more about them in part 3 as well as in part 2, but I'll also link below a video that Nick True did. He's a really big Ynab YouTuber and really big in the Ynab community. He did a great video highlighting 22 of his favorite features. But I'll talk more about that, like I said, in later videos. But if you've never heard of it, I would definitely look into it, especially if you use Ynab a lot on your computer, like I do. So that's one of the Toolkit for Ynab tips that I wanted to show you. And then the last tip for this video is another Toolkit for Ynab feature. I'm going to jump forward to August where I don't have any money budgeted, and then you'll see here all of my categories where I have a goal set is actually blue, and the default for Ynab is actually a kind of pale yellow color, like over here where this available amount is. And so what I did is came over to the Toolkit for Ynab, and I think it's up. It's this goal indicator warning color. I just turn that on, and that will change the orange goal underfunded warning to blue. And what this does is help differentiate any credit card overspending, because credit card overspending is also reflected in this kind of pale orange yellow color. And so that way, if you ever see that color, you know, okay, that's credit card overspending versus a goal that's not been met yet. And it's just a quick way to visually tell the difference between those two things. So those are all of my really quick tips and tricks, the things that I pretty much look at or use anytime I'm in Ynab, and my favorite ways to personalize my budget for the budgeting and categories section. I hope you find this helpful. I have a lot of Ynab budgeting videos where I actually go through my actual numbers and my actual Ynab budget. And so you can see some of those principles in action if you haven't already, and I'll link the playlist for that video at the end of this video. And then be on the lookout in the next month or so for part 2 and part 3, where again, part 2, we're going to be going over the accounts and transaction side of things. And then part 3, we're going to be doing a more deep dive into Toolkit for Ynab. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys are staying safe and healthy during all of this, and have a good day. Oh, also, before I forget, make sure to follow me on Instagram. It's Zennial Finance. That's ZENNIAL Finance, where I'm sharing more of my personal wealth journey, and personal finance tips and tricks and all of that. So make sure to follow me on that as well as subscribe to my channel. All right, now I'm finally done talking.